how they navigate through their APIs and database to produce great products. And we looked at Netflix, we looked at Amazon. These are products that have stand the test of time with the evolving tech space, right? Um they still stand relevant, over the whole years. So even right before the whole AI surge, they were relevant. COVID came still relevant. This is we have passed the pre-AI part now. I think we are into the mid level of AI, and they are still relevant. Still very very much relevant. So something to look at on how they're able to manage this and stay relevant. Um, Basically, we looked at that, and that's from the technical side, how to manage their APIs and also their database. Um, so yeah, today we're actually going to. There's a slide I'm still owning this class, rule of TPMs, but I just could not get myself to compile that together. But I'll see if we can combine it with next class. But basically, today we're actually going to be looking at creating a product, from the technical side of things. So what makes it different for you as a technical PM, in product development life cycle basically, or let me just say um the first stage of a product development before launch. Let me just say pre-launch phase. What it looks like for a technical PM. So let me just share my screen so just get started. All right, so defining a product with your API and database needs, right? So at the end of this class or session, we should be able to, break down a product's idea into your data and service needs, right? Uh, know where we store our data and then how we structure it, and then actions to be performed, which are your APIs. Then we also create a basic flow between, from user interaction, just like the interaction between client and server side. That's just it. Then working collaboratively with developers to define the system requirements clearly. Right. So in for a product manager, for developing a new feature or a new product, right? You need to have your goal, your vision, right, for that product. So the company's vision actually determines or is flows into your the vision for a particular feature that you probably want to incorporate, or a new product or sub products that you want to create, right? Say for an existing company, that's where you have that. Then for a new product entirely for a new company, what the company's goal and aims and visions, that also drives what you build on, right? So that's why you see um Nike, for example, now, their vision, if you notice every service that they offer, every service, every product, even their advertisements, if you check it, it has a linking with the vision of Nike. If you check whatever it is they do, same thing with Coca-Cola, right? Their adverts, their services, even the humanitarian service they do, they link it in a way to their vision, right? The vision of the product. That's why for a product manager, it's very important to internalize what the vision of that company is, or what the vision of the product is. So it forms basically everything that you'll be doing as a product manager. So for the first one, let's use our regular. Sorry, can anyone still hear me? Hi, can anyone still hear me?
Hi.
Yeah, hi,
Hi.
Margaret.
Okay, yes. You will not I like I think you went off for a while, but you can continue. I don't know if you
Okay,
can still hear you.
yeah, okay. If you hear me, can you hear me? I think she's having network challenges. It's probably to be slow for her a bit.
Rest assured, is everybody that is having network challenges.
It's been terrible these days. But then, anyway. So we'll be using our make believe application Globy. So the product aim basically is, so I didn't put in the vision. I don't know whatever the vision wants to be at this point, but there's no vision here. But basically, this particular product, there should be a vision. Maybe is to provide sustainable or homegrown meals, healthy homegrown meals or to provide healthy meals to the public or to eat right or something. So probably maybe the I'm actually just making up a product now. So from that vision, what we want to do is to ensure that every individual that uses Glory has access to healthy meals. So we're actually putting sanctions on all our restaurants that the materials we even use to package has to be, eco-friendly materials that are healthy. Their food processing will come to inspect it before you become a restaurant, so we're providing healthy meals. Our bikes that we'll be using, or those that will be signing up, will probably be using, energy renewable gas or renewable gas or something that's eco-friendly. So probably Globe is all about being eco-friendly and healthy, right? So now for this particular, for our MVP, which is an ordering app, right? Before we now put in maybe bikes or other things. But basically, MVP is an ordering app where customer can browse the menu, place an order, and then track the delivery. So basically, that's what's going to be happening on this one, right? Um. So first off, you want to identify the functional requirements. Now, this does not in any way cancels out um your um your product processes, right, as a product manager. Um, but once you want to check out the technical side of things, you now start picking out information from your documentation. So you go through the whole process of, having your user stories, your personas, your PRD, use cases, and all of that, right? You would actually have all of those documentations. Now, for the technical side, bear in mind that 90 or let me say 80% of it will be done by the engineers, will be done by your data guys, will be done by your UI, UX, design, your product designers, right? You as a product manager just comes in to ensure that, okay, do you understand what is required from the technical side of things, right? So you also want to coin out your functional requirements from your documentations as a product manager. I don't know if this is making sense or anyone has a question.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
You talked about use cases. Can you explain what you mean by use cases? Because I really don't understand. I've been hearing this quite a lot. I've been reading, I've been seeing it a lot of stuff I've been reading lately. So please, what are
Um,
use cases? Because I know QA testers have test cases. But
yeah.
please, for PMs, what are use cases?
Okay,
And is
so
it
you're used. I think that was the last thing you said.
compulsory we have use cases?
Um, so yeah, kinda, to help your product design and then also for the functional requirements as well too, right? So your use case basically is, let me paint the picture. Let me use this Glowy for example. Um, you have what the use cases outlines the users, the major users, and then what they should be able to do on the application, right? So a user, basically a use case for a user for Glory would user should be able to log in or sign up, and then signing up email has to be this that's based on what is required, like what is necessities
That
on your
sounds like acceptance criteria.
uh, yeah, yeah. So you can actually have your use case and acceptance criteria together.
Because I write my acceptance criteria like this that you just said, like
That's the
the way you just said it. Yes. So the
okay.
user must be able to do this, and that. The email address must have 8 characters,
Hmm,
uppercase this and that. If one of the characters, one of the requirements is not met, an error message should be displayed like this.
yeah. So what
Yeah.
your use case does is it kind of like just gives an overview of what every user should be able to perform, or what actions the users also perform on the application. So let me just jump off my head. Um. Uh. Okay. So recently we did one for a feature we wanted to do on expense. So for that particular feature, we had one of the users is the fee admin or the accountant. So what are the things that the accountant should have access to and should be able to do? The accountant, should enter for the ledger, this stuff like this now. I'm just jumping off my head. But then we have the accountant, we had the admin who is in charge of, ensuring that whatever money is being approved, like approving, I'm just say approving spendings or expenses or payrolls. Then you also have the what's the third user we even had then? Who is that person now? Yeah, the vendors basically. Was it the vendors now? So basically you have those different um use cases, right? So you're supposed to be able to spell out what each of these users should have access to and should be able to do on the application to successfully complete their own process. So if I'm say maybe an end user, okay, let me use Google Safe. I'm an end user, I should be able to sign up. When I sign up, get an email, activate my email, um uh, order for food, make choices on what kind of food I want, how I when I want to deliver the whatever it is, what I want to add extra on it, then I should be able to pay, at the checkout and then have it delivered to me. That's sign off and whatever it is. So it just generally it's just what it looks like, or the functionalities for the users, for each user should have on the application. Yeah, Margaret, go ahead, please.
So okay, fine. I have an idea of what the use case is. So is it all right to write your acceptance criteria as like as a use case? And also, if that is a use case, what is an acceptance criteria like? Because I write acceptance criteria as use cases.
And the acceptance criteria may not actually fully cover what the use case is for a particular user. You know, it's you can actually have your use case and then have the acceptance criteria just immediately after it. That works. But I don't think an acceptance criteria would actually cover entirely what the um what the users or what that particular user is to do. So you can have your use case and just underneath it you have your acceptance criteria, maybe for the errors if a wrong thing has been repeated and whatnot. And then people maybe when they log in, they should already have access to this if they are this type of user, that's the authentication and authorization thing. So, but I don't think yeah, acceptance criteria is actually like um covers what the use case is, but they work together. They actually
Okay,
work together.
okay. Thank
Mhm.
you.
All right. So now you have, like I mentioned, you have all your documentations normally as a PM, right? And that's where you pick all of this, you know. Um. Oh, oh, Fakem is having serious network issues. Okay. All right. Can schedule a one-on-one same time. All right. So what the product does, your functional requirements. So functionally, or from the user side, is supposed to be able to like browse the restaurant menu, add items to cart, place and track order. You also have your user login, the whole onboarding phase or sign up, and then profile management. So basically, these are functional requirements for an ordering app. Bearing in mind that this is just the ordering part of the product, right? So step two, yeah, go ahead, Margaret. Go ahead.
So the functional parts of a product, do we call them? Okay, let's say we are about to launch this product. Let's say we are
Yeah.
about to like take it live and everything. Are we now saying that the functional product is you can't build the whole product? I just come in along the way, even after launch, what you want to add and maybe things you might want to remove. But let's say we're about to launch this
Yeah.
product and we have those functional parts listed. Do we call them our MVPs? Is it right to call them our MVPs?
You can actually just make it, for our own, it's meal ordering, right? So we could actually just put the function requirement in bracket meal ordering. So if any idea comes in, or maybe you've launched this and then maybe there are other users are sitting towards other things, or there are other things that you want to add, you can now put in function requirements for whatever that new thing is.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm saying is
Mm,
this functional requirements now. Okay, so
yeah.
now these are the basic function for the ordering app. Are they also the same thing as MVPs?
In this case, let's just call it our MVP, right? Since we are let's just rename this um Glovy, or let's just do Glovy in brackets MVP, right? Since we already know it's a meal ordering app, so we can just call it like Glovy and then our MVP. So our MVP
Okay.
basically we're going to write it
Then I
down,
think
meal
another
ordering.
question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Margaret.
um, Yeah, network. My network is lagging. I don't know if it's mine or yours, but
Okay, you
um,
can.
what I wanted
Okay.
to ask is MVP is only used. Is it used only when you're about to launch a new product, or it can be used at any time?
Can be used at any time, not just when you want to launch a new product. So you even have a new
Okay.
feature, you have a new feature, right, that you want to add, right? The first one you're going to give to the public is your MVP, right? And remember, the feature is inside the products that you have already launched. So any new thing that you're introducing to the public basically is your MVP. So you treat it as such. What I mean by treating it as such is make it as useful as possible, like useful to the user as possible, before you start iterating. So also your MVP basically just helps you to understand your users better, and then knowing what works for them and getting feedback. So MVP is all about putting your ears to the ground to hear the users. Like it's not just okay, I released this, let me go and relax. No, it's basically for feedback. Like that is kind of like the breaking point for anything you're going to be doing from there. That's why most companies try to push out MVP faster, and then also try to spend very less but be very big on gathering feedback, and that's where AI is helping out companies now to bring out the best MVP they can, because to be very honest, that's the break or the make or what is how just that English is for products generally. Okay. So yeah. So your product use cases. Yeah. So this is the customer for this particular application, Glovy, customer registration and login, right? And so, like I said, there are major activities. Since we have just one user for this ordering, which is our that's just one. You just have one use case basically for this one, which is the user, right? And the restaurant also, yeah, the restaurant also, and the users. So, customer registration and login, browsing restaurants and menus, but I think I kind of skipped that restaurant part out because for this MVP, let me just give background. The restaurants will be uploaded by the product itself, like by the internal team, not like a restaurant coming to register on the platform, right? So we are going out there and getting restaurants and uploading them by ourselves on the application. So in this case now we have just one use case, which is the user. But in a very more detailed um in a more detailed documentation, basically you can have that on the side, right? Just on the side basically. So users browsing restaurants and menus, placing orders, payment processing, restaurants receiving and updating other statuses. This will be us, right? From this, restaurant the key, blah blah blah, data domains. So remember um our focus today is basically on the you know um API and database. So this is like the server side, of things. The client side, which is your road mapping, your personas, and all of that, is done for the client side by you, the product manager. Now, a technical product manager, you also need to kind of like clearly structure out or ensure that the technical side is clearly structured out, right? Um, and if the engineers are working on anything, they are going to be picking it from your documentation. There's nothing that is happening here that is far from what you already set out as a clear structure for what the product will look like, right? So now for our database, defining our database needs. This is also what your database guys or the engineers are basically going to be using for the database. But because you're a technical PM, you need to ensure that it is properly done. So define database means figuring out what data your product needs to store, retrieve, update, and delete. For a normal product manager, they don't even bother about this part. But for you, it's actually something you should, know about. So even while you're preparing your documentation, what needs to be stored as regards, like the data, what customers will be requesting for, the update delete. You're familiar with all of this theory, and then how it will be structured, related, and secured, right, for your database. So you want to group them into the entities. So from your use case, which is our user, which is going to have like information that will be stored. The entity are the customer, the restaurant, menu item, order, other items, and payments, right? And okay, customer facing food orders, the restaurant, businesses offering food, many items, the drinks and whatnot. The order is for the customer, other items and items in the menu, and then payments, right? So basically these are the entities that you want to be working with on your database, and each of them are going to have their different attributes. If you remember what we talked about when we're looking at database schema. Hi Margaret, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Right. So now we have our user, we have, now it's like putting their attributes. So for the customer, we definitely have this as a user, and their ID, their email, first name, last name, this kind of breaking out to it. Phone number, their password. These are the attributes that will be stored under the user table, right? Then we have the restaurant. So notice that I don't know if I put that in this slide. No, I did not. But notice that you see. Yeah, go ahead, Margaret. Please go ahead.
Okay, so now what I want to ask is, when we are structuring or defining our database needs so that the developers are very well aware of it and
Mm.
like what they need to store and what they do not. This is how we are going to do it. Like create this table, the entity and the attributes to the entity, so they know what exactly they are going to be reproducing or what.
For this one, right? You have to be working hand in hand with the um dev guys, right? We work hand in hand with them. But in working hand in hand with them, you need to understand what is happening. And yet, you basically will not be the one doing most of this. But when they show you this, right, you understand what is required. And then generally from your use cases, you already know what are the entities you should look out for on the database, right? You will not want a situation where you are just focused on the client side, and at the end of the day, the database is not even tracking other items. So every order that is being placed is not even saved anywhere, and then one day it just comes up and then we don't have that information, we were not saving it. So that's why it's like important. You are actually working with its collaboration. You're working with the engineers, or if it's a more advanced base, your data guys or data engineers, to work on this.
So what I'm
But
saying
basically, this is
is,
literally,
what I,
yeah. Go ahead.
what I'm asking is, do we define what needs to be in the database, what needs to be stored, and what needs to be deleted? I don't know if you get. Do we define that? Okay, oh, okay. Now we're using the food delivery app. Let's say both. Let's use a ride hailing app for example. Every rider and every driver has an ID. So
Mhm.
now that ID,
Mhm.
was it defined by the product manager that that ID must be saved, even though the riders or the drivers do not know that they have an ID, but back end we can identify who is who with that ID. I don't know if you get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now what I'm saying is that like, was that specifically defined by the product manager? Let's say technical product manager. That's what I'm asking.
Yes, I would say
That we must
yes.
have an ID.
That's an example. Yeah. So from your functional requirements, that is where you get your entities, and then what the attributes of each of those entities. The example you used is not such a good example, but in that context of your example, yes, clearly defined what is going to be saved, you know. And then also another disclaimer, most of the tools you'd be using, right, because of the evolution of technology generally, there are some basic things that they would definitely put on your table for each of your entities. When I say put on your table, that's the attribute for each of your entity tables, right? Just generally as a default. So why I brought that out is ID is default for anything you're going to be using. Every table definitely has an ID to identify it, right? But as I say, the example is not so good. But in the context of your question, yes, they have to be clearly defined what entities are going to be tracked on your database. Does that answer your question?
Um, I can't exactly say, but maybe you're not getting where I'm coming from. I don't know.
If you could paint another scenario so that probably I understand better.
Okay, please, can I see the next slide where you have all those IDs
It
and
actually
all those things?
right?
Exactly. Yeah, like this. So now, for on the database, is an ID automatically? Sorry, please, excuse me.
Mm.
I sorry for that. So first of all, on the database, is
Yeah.
the ID automatically generated, or does the product manager say that, like, make it a requirement? I don't know if you understand. I don't know if that is really, really right.
Okay, so
Or
if you are particular about the ID bar, every entity, that's every table must have an ID.
okay, based
If
on the
not,
screen, or based on what is on your screen, I'm seeing
mm,
user. So we could have a table for users,
yeah,
but each user has different ID. One, two, no two users can have the same ID, right?
yeah, not two users can have the same ID.
Okay, so now that, so are you saying, you say every table has an ID? Let's say we have a table for users that have
Mm,
their names, their emails, their phone numbers, and whatsoever. Are you saying that
yeah.
that particular table for users has its own ID?
Oh
Then
no,
the
no, no. So when I say every table has an ID, meaning like an ID column. So every
oh,
entity will have its own ID to uniquely identify it.
okay, now that
So
is clear. And
okay, so
this is not determined by the product manager, right?
no, no, no. It's just if it doesn't have, if the table does not have an ID column, it's not to be considered. It's one of the rules for database schema design, right?
Okay, so if you do not have it as a requirement in your design, it will
Mm.
not be there.
It's not even considered a database if you don't have an ID column for a table.
Okay, okay, now I get.
It's a compulsory thing. So every table must have an ID column.
Okay.
Yeah, the PM doesn't have to say it. If it doesn't exist, the column doesn't exist. That's not it's not a database at all. And there's no database tool that you'll be using that would even allow it, because you can have two different two the same, let me say similar or the same other entries in other tables, but you can't have two entries having the same ID. If it's going into a call into a row, it must fall under a particular ID. So that's just the schema design. You can go through the class or in database schema designing for to have better clarity on that. And then the I think it was Fido we used as well, so you can check, play around more with Fido to see those set down rules for structured database. It's more clear. All right, can we proceed? Hi, Margaret. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah.
Yeah,
mm,
yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So yeah, for your this like your database, to be able to have your database schema or a database design, basically to have the attributes. So you want to kind of like in a way outline, you know, or collaborate when you are doing this. So we have users, we have restaurants as an entity or a table, And then on the restaurant table, you have the ID, the name of the restaurant, address, rating. If you are collecting phone numbers of the restaurants too, yeah, it's also a requirement, um, that'll be added. Then for the menu item table, you have the ID, the name, description, price, and restaurant ID. So you notice a repetition of ID colon restaurant ID. So this is a foreign key, while this is a primary key, right? So whatever, if the user orders from, say, restaurant A, and restaurant A ID is 112, right? So whatever the user on the menu, if it's restaurant A, it will definitely show you as 112. Not necessarily, it's not, instead of it picking the restaurant ID, name, address, and rating again into this table. It just picks the ID 112. So once 112 is entered, you know that 112 is restaurant A, and this is the name of restaurant A, this is the address, this is the rating. So that's the function of a foreign key. Just a recap to what the class we had on database. Right. So yeah, then the order table, price, status, timestamp, these are important things that you want to track, when an order is placed. Then order item, you want to, track the item ID. So this is another foreign key again, right? So on the order item, you have the menu of what the user ordered for. So instead of repeating all of this again in the table and confusing the whole database, and giving for errors, we just use the foreign key item ID. So if for customer A, the item they ordered had item ID of 52, right? But this other item for this customer, this particular order that was made, it should just have 52. So we know that the 52 has this name, description and all of that. So yeah, so that's a coincidence. Then you now establish the relationship. All of this are just recap of our database schema design we did. So we have the one to many, one to one, and we also allow that one order can have many items. And one restaurant can have many items. This is one to many. One user can have many orders. So this becomes, our schema to be able to translate into our database design, right? So these are also requirements that you are ensuring are put in place as a technical PM, to have to clearly define your product database, right? Any questions on that before we go to APIs? Okay, so there's also security. For most of the tools we'll be using, they give you a breakdown of the kind of security that they offer. So that also decide, when you're deciding what tools you're using for your database or what you're using to store your database, that is MongoDB or Postgres. So you look at those information, and that's why I didn't add it to the slides. Then there's also compliance. So there are some countries that would have some compliance regulations for privacy or what kind of information you can store for your users. So that also depends on the product you're working with. But then, yeah, it's very important to ensure that you are not going against the compliance requirements of the law for your product. Because most times when competitors want to close out a particular product or company from the legal side, and the last people you want to chase you is the government. So yeah, you need to be careful on that. Just so you know what is permitted to store as regards, and then how what is the privacy, whatever, for the citizens of that country is. Okay, so now for your API requirements, now you've put out the clear. There's a clear understanding for your database, right? Now for your API requirements, right? So what actions should the app allow via APIs? So bearing in mind that you are doing your internal APIs, for what happens within your product, and you're also, like integrating other APIs if there is a need to for the particular product. So I think for our ordering app, the only external ones that we'll be using is the payment gateways. And probably if you have map on the, I don't think we'll have map on this our own yet, Sha. Basically, since we're having everything back then for now, for the restaurants and stuff, all users will just come and order. So that's why it's important to clearly also define, um your at the beginning of your I think of the documentation, what it is that you're doing, clearly stated out. So it's customer can browse the menu, place an order and track delivery. So whatever you're building, you are in the confines of this for now, except and if you want to expand, you still need to update all of this so that anybody going through this, fully understands what is required from them at any given point in time. All right. So, what action should the app allow via API? So, view menu. This could be the endpoints. Yeah, go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, so who selects the who picks the APIs now? Okay, so what I'm trying to understand is, yeah, we've talked about APIs, endpoints, and everything. So now the APIs that we're going to be integrating, who decides it? The PM. Okay, based on the feature or based on the actions that we want. The I believe that is the actions that want to happen determines the APIs that we will use, right?
Yeah. So let me just answer in clear terms. Well, your engineers will actually create the APIs. You'll generate the APIs.
Okay.
Yeah, is what they are going to do. Um, they will actually generate the APIs for everything that is going to be done, right? On the products. So on this particular table that we have here, right, this endpoint part and the methods part, right? Um, you would work with the engineers. Remember, your engineers have seen your functional requirements, they've seen your documentation, you've had sessions and meetings to talk about the products, right? So while you're even developing your own documentation thing, user personas and all, they on their own end, they're also having conversations within themselves about what API will work, what endpoint will work. Since you've already had conversation on, okay, this is what we want to do though, and these are the tools, that will work for us, right? And then they have, started working on, or they maybe even almost done with their own software architecture, right? And documentation on what it is we're using and all. And remember, all of this will also be in your documentation. So this is also kind of like a collaborative thing between you as the PM and the engineers, but they would actually create the APIs and endpoints for each of these things, but they will get their information on what they are creating from your own documentation and from conversations. So you know that for this particular application we are building now, there should be a menu, more like a menu page sort of. There's an add to cart, there's place order, there's track add order, there's this is the onboarding and login thing. Maybe this should have been up before download, whichever way. So they'll actually create APIs and endpoints for all of these things. That would work. That's their job, basically. But then it needs to be clearly defined what are the API requirements for the particular products that we're using. All right. Um, Does that answer your question, Margaret? Hi, Margaret.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So just bear
Yes, it
with
does.
me. That most times I try to say plenty or give plenty illustrations. If at any point you're still not clear, please just feel free to take me back, and so that maybe I didn't really understand or not clearly explained or something, we can work on it, you know, to ensure that we both you understand and then also I pass out the right information. And so also please feel free at any point to stop me and keep asking to get it right. Okay, so now you want to, we're done with our APIs, right? The requirements, we know these are the, from our use case, what they're supposed to be able to do, register, that's creating, login, place an order. This is really scattered. Place an order, view the menu, place an order, add it to carts, pay, then track the order. Right. So all of these things that we've done, or this user flow for your use cases, then put it that way, we basically have APIs and endpoints, right? For each of them, for whatever it is you want to, because your APIs actually are activated, or should I say are called, once an action is taken from the client side. So you already have it on your user flow or on your use cases, what it is that the user should be able to do. And all of these things that the user are doing is calling APIs, right? It's trying to strike on one endpoint or the other. So they have to be an API for it, right? Login, register, and login data on video menu, track, place the order, add it to carts, or add it to cart. I think one of this is good for the other. Then track your order.
Okay, so my network kicked me out,
Oh,
but don't worry, you can continue.
okay. Today's a good day. Anyway, we have just few minutes, so let's just keep going and see how we can do before it's time. Okay, so map your data flow from the UI, which is the client side, to API to database. The UI is where the client will call the API or make an action. The API is the travel vehicle to the database and then back to the UI. So we'll just use an example. I really wanted this class to be very interactive, but it's all good. Probably when we've gone through the slides, we can ask questions next week. So a very quick example for the flow from UI to database and back is when a customer places an order. There are other flows that happens, data flows that happen maybe when a customer onboards or when a customer um is tracking the order, or when whatever function they are doing is data flow for it. But we're going to use just one example, right? So user clicks on order in the UI, which is like the client side. Then the UI sends a post request. This post request is going to contain the API call. That's with the API call with the endpoints. The endpoint being the position where it is on the database. It will have also its request URL. That carries um the request, which is the client clicking on order. So it takes it to orders. Orders is the order table on the database. So now in creating placing an order, before I even click on order, I've put in the details of my order, right? Selected. I have a restaurant. Our orders table has our restaurant ID. So I have a restaurant I've selected. I have the food or the menu that I've selected, maybe the rice menu or something. I have, made all those requests, basically selected what I wanted, and then I now click on order. So there's now a post request to orders. So on the back end, it validates the user and cart contents, right? saves order to the order and other items table. So those information I filled before clicking on order, it saves it. Then it now returns confirmation with the order ID. So what it's returning on the um response side when you check your um internet, that's your network terminal, which is when you inspect, right? The response you get will come with the order ID because they have just created a new order now, and then estimated delivery. So you know that our order ID has um what they call it now, a time distance that, where is it? Yes, okay. So and then our order item, right? Item ID. And our order basically has a timestamp, right? And then status and timestamp. So when I create the order, definitely my status will be maybe pending or something, right? And then order item contain this item ID, right? And then quantity of what it is that I'm ordering for. So basically, it just picks all this information and sends it back to the user. Right? The user can actually try to check order status, yeah, the status of the order, and then based on the time stamp or activities going on the back end, it's also sent a response. But for placing an order, this is actually the flow from the client side to back end and then to the database. Um, does it make sense to this point? Trying to just beat the time.
Yes, I think so. Yes, it does. It actually does.
Okay. All right. So your responsibilities in defining your product needs. We talked about the data side, database side, and your APIs, right? For the database, you work with engineers to define what entities and relationships are needed, right? Um, the APIs, you have drafted your user stories, API specs. Well, maybe you don't necessarily need to do this one, but you work with your engineers to do this. So your get requests, the response request, and all of that, status codes, 200, the 400, 500 errors, or status codes, right? But yeah, you have to draft the user stories so they understand what they are building as per their APIs. Then collaboration, another of your responsibility. So you have to ensure cross-functional clarity. So as much as possible, all of this that we've done in defining our database, working with our engineers to clearly define our database, clearly define, API documentations and all, clearly defining your user stories, your personas, and all for the design team, you know, and then clearly defining roadmaps for stakeholders. Generally, all of this is just to ensure clarity on everybody's end. Everybody is clear on what is required. It's not after sprint one. You now notice that somebody was thinking, oh, I thought it should be like this or it should be like that. No. Right from the beginning, there is clarity on what needs to be done. You will just be shocked that after 2 weeks, everybody is going, one person is going to Zanzibar, one person is going to Zambia, another person is in South Africa. So to prevent all of that, you need to have, clear understanding with everybody involved, right? From the dev design. The key will also take their test cases from your user flow, your acceptance criteria, and all of that, right? On what data is used and when. So also testing. So you define your acceptance criteria. It's definitely tied to your data API behavior. So this is just to help all teams to be on the same page, what is expected and what should be done. Yeah, so every product with a digital front end needs both data and actions. Yeah, and then a technical PM does not need to code, but it must clearly define how users interact with the system and then how the system stores and processes the data. Then you bridge the business goals and the technical architecture basically as a TPM. So any questions?
For now, no questions, but I believe that later on we'll have like a one-on-one. Maybe not
Okay.
maybe, but I'll definitely need your advice with something.
Okay.
Maybe a project I'm working on. So maybe
Not
then.
a problem. Always
Sir?
available. It's not a problem. Always available to assist anyway.
Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. So I think we're just in time for your next meeting. Um, yeah,
Yes.
thank you very much for joining today's class.
Thank you too.
Let me quickly upload this so that we can go through. Do you have an amazing evening?
And you too. Bye.
Yeah, bye.